Welcome back to Meeting the Mix. Today we're joined by Christina Pamies. Christina is a rising screenwriter for the upcoming horror film Baghead, among other works like No Good Deed. Her impressive academic history includes a Bachelor of Arts in Film Studies from Columbia University, a certificate in screenwriting from UCLA, a Doctor of Law from Georgetown, and of course, a Master of Arts in Film Studies from American University. Her most recent work on Baghead brings her to the forefront of upcoming screenwriters, and we are so honored to be able to talk to you today. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I just have to say, Christina, I am a horror fanatic, so this is an exciting episode for me. I was that child that was directing horror films with the chunky cameras, and it was just a lot of fun for me. Horror's always been one of my favorite genres, so I really am excited to talk about this. I do want to just start with a little fun, lighthearted question of, was there ever like a first horror movie or book or anything in this genre that kind of pulled you into the genre, or did you find yourself kind of stumbling upon it, by chance, kind of how the path came about?
Well, I'm also a huge horror fan. I've been a horror fan my entire life. I think, as a kid, I loved ghost stories. I loved them. I loved to be scared. I loved to be thrilled. My aunt she is also a horror fan, and she used to tell like her own ghost stories. She'd make them up and we'd like sit around her, like rapt attention. I did read a lot. I think I started reading Stephen King around the time I was 11 or 12. And one of the first horror movies I remember watching was Child's Play. So it's been fun to see that rebooted. But yeah, I think it's just been a comfort zone for me. I've always loved horror.
That's awesome. And I'm going to kind of pivot to the more screenwriting aspect of it. Is there anything that kind of sparked your interest in screenwriting? We'll go on to American University in a second, but I guess just starting with that question of kind of how you got into the screenwriting world.
Well, as you mentioned, I was a film studies major in college, and the classes that I loved the most were the writing classes. Storytelling is something that has always appealed to me just because I always loved reading and I've always loved watching movies. So it just seemed sort of like the natural pivot. And so, yeah, those were the classes I loved the most. And, coming up with horror is always super fun because I think horror depends on this element of surprise. And because if it's not surprising, if you can't surprise people, then it's not that scary. And that's a fun challenge. It's always just, it's just like a fun puzzle to solve. How do you surprise people?
I love that. And we obviously have to talk about SOC, just give a little shout out. Is there anything like during your time at American University that helped you expand on your interest? I know you said writing classes were your favorite, but is there like a special class that you remember, or a professor, or just a memory that you can kind of pull from that you feel, I guess, is the most, that's the part 2 question, but yeah, let's start with that one.
Yes, absolutely. Because actually in undergrad, I never took a feature writing class. I had only taken short screenwriting classes. So it wasn't until I took the feature class at American that I realized that I could actually write a whole feature. It's really daunting, I think, until you actually go ahead and do it. So I took Giles Wheeler's feature writing class. I think there was 2 parts to it. And, one was writing the feature, and then the second part was rewriting the feature. So that was like my first time that I actually sat down and wrote a whole screenplay. And, once I knew I could actually do it, it's just opened up this new, this new ability. I felt like I could do it again. So that was great.
I love that. And I guess this kind of answers my part 2, but would you say that was kind of your most valuable takeaway from your time at American, just kind of knowing I can do it and hopefully I can do this again?
I think so. It feels like a huge hurdle before you actually do it, right? And then being surrounded by people who are doing the same thing and having that kind of encouragement, is just, there's nothing else like that. I think, writing often is so solitary and you're just doing it on your own. And so to be able to be, enveloped in this really caring environment and everyone's sort of working together on their own goals is really rewarding and inspiring.
Yeah. And I find myself coming across these moments too. But if you, now that you're, far removed from being a student and being here, is there anything you wish you could have told yourself when you were a student, or any advice you have to the students now? We always love kind of shouting out anything that, they can find useful, I guess.
Yeah, I just feel like what I would tell myself and others is that there's no correct timetable for, you know, pursuing your dreams and accomplishing things that you want to accomplish. I think when I was a student, I almost felt like, what am I doing? I was married. I was pregnant for my last year at American. I had a baby, I think, during my last semester. And I'm like, this is, what am I doing? This is wild. I need to be settling down. I need to be doing like the correct, responsible things. But I don't know. I think that it's, there's no like I said, there's no correct path. And if you can figure out a way to pursue the thing you've been wanting to do for your whole life, then try to do it. And don't let these doubts, you know, grow in your brain.
That's great. Good advice. I like that advice. And especially the no correct timetable. It's just kind of like, got to just do what's best for you in the moment. And then that kind of brings me into my next point. And the process of writing itself. I know you touched on a few points, like, short films versus feature film script might be a little more daunting. That page number might feel a little more daunting. Even the process of kind of getting, I know some people get to experience a writer's room with a whole team of people, and some people, like you said, it's a very independent process. What's your advice, just for anyone wanting to take on that role of, I want to get a script down, I want to get 90 to 120 pages of writing, and is there any advice you'd give to kind of that process, especially as you do it on your own? Was there, like, would you set a schedule for yourself, or is there anything you can kind of touch on in that sense? Because I know a lot of our students are working through those independent projects right now.
Sure. I do try to set a schedule for myself. I drop my kids off at school around 8. I come home, and then, until I pick them up at 2, that's my writing time. But I do try not to like beat myself up if I don't, I don't want to throw myself off or, get upset if I can't adhere to a rigid schedule. I think that's not very helpful. But I try to work at least 4 hours every morning. Um, for approaching a screenplay, I think outlining is always really helpful. I start with an outline, and I usually make a scene outline and plan a little bit of each scene, maybe just like a sentence for each scene. And lately I've been getting into visual outlines, like visual scene boards and things like that. I'll find pictures, shots from other films, shots of I find inspiring, and I incorporate them into my outlines. And that, I don't know, it feels like it kind of opens your mind a bit, and starts the creative process for me. So that's what I try to do.
That's awesome. And then, actually, on the topic of the creative process, I know we got a lot of questions about. We do like to reach out to the students and be like, "What questions would you like to hear about? This or that." And a lot of people had questions about actually the writing process, not just scheduling and all of that, but honestly, how you bring these characters to life. Like, how do you? I know a lot of people, when they write comedy or drama or this, so they'll pull from stories that have happened to them. But horror, obviously there's a lot of fiction there sometimes, so it could be a little different. Do you find, like, yeah, I guess, how do you find the character's development? How do you kind of go through all of that in your head? And then I had a question here. Do plot points kind of reveal themselves as you work along on the script, or is that something that you have planned out prior? So all those little things, can you just give
Yeah.
any insight to that?
I think characters, I wouldn't say I ever base characters on people I know, but I definitely draw from real people, real personalities, like real quirks. And that really helps in shaping, characters that feel like complete whole human beings. And then once you're sort of in that headspace of really knowing this character, I think the plot does sort of reveal itself. You're thinking, first of all, you're thinking like, what's the most difficult challenge I can throw at this character right now? And then once you have that, if you know the character really well, you're like, well, then how would this character respond to that? What would they do? And that's takes you in the direction of the character's arc and the character's journey. Um, so yeah, I think it is, it's hard to nail down exactly how inspiration comes, but I think really putting yourself in the mind of your character is a big help.
I always wondered that too. I didn't know if you like, you think about real people that you know and you kind of pull from those like personalities. That's really cool to hear. And then on that note as well, can you kind of just walk us through the process for a screenwriter? So I guess let's start from the beginning. So you have this script. Did you write the script independently, and then you approached a studio? Was it in works with a studio while you were writing the script? Can you just kind of give insight to maybe the different experiences you've had in the screenwriting world?
Sure. So, I've written scripts just on spec on my own independently. I've done that. You know, that's kind of its own thing. Baghead was a writing assignment. Studio Canal had the rights to this short, this great short from from Alberto Corridor, and they were looking for a writer to adapt it to a feature, and they were taking pitches. So I knew the producers a little bit. I'd had meeting with them before, and I had seen the short. I loved the short, and I had an idea. I just sort of had the spark of an idea at first, but I sort of teased it out and into a full, 20-minute pitch or so, where if you are brought in to pitch for a writing assignment, you would develop a 20-minute pitch. You would take the producers through your whole concept for the movie, beginning, middle, and end, almost like you're telling the story of the movie. Like if you had seen a movie in theaters and you were telling a friend, like, this is what happened, this is how the movie played out. That's kind of how you would pitch it to the executives or the producers that you're in a meeting with. So yeah, I pitched it to them. They liked it. Um, and they hired me to write the movie. So I didn't have to do any writing beforehand. It was just, we worked out the contract, and I signed it. And this was right around the time that COVID was happening, so there was a lot of delays, and I think there's always delays even without complication. But yeah, we got through the contract stuff, and once I was officially hired for the job, we did have some meetings. I talked to the director. I talked about his vision, and the producers. We all had a few conversations about, what we hoped to accomplish with this draft. And then, yeah, I sort of went off on my own for maybe about 8 weeks, wrote a first draft, and then came back to them for their thoughts. So that was the timeline.
That's really cool. And then how involved are you after the script is developed? So is there any like do you get to choose how involved you are, or is that set based on the contract?
Yeah. I think there is some flexibility. I think sometimes you do kind of have to ask for how you have to push if you really want to be really involved. And you kind of have to be mindful of everyone's role. You don't want to step on toes. The director wants to have his creative control on the set. You don't want to, you don't want to draw anything from that. But I did get to be some, involved there. There was some rewriting done during production, and I came back for that, adding a few scenes, adding a few ADR lines here and there. So I did feel like I was involved in the process, and because it filmed in Germany, and I have elementary school aged kids, I didn't get to go travel to the set to watch filming, but that's a big goal for me on future projects. I'm hoping that if any of them are filming closer to home, I'll be able to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you just mentioned rewriting was done during production. So can you just touch a little bit on that? So how does that work exactly? Will they like say like we kind of want to pivot this scene a little bit?
Yeah, there was just some, they wanted to do some reshoots after the initial production period. They had a few goals for just clarifying things, sometimes with um, especially with horror movies where there's lots of like rules, rules for how the supernatural works. You just want to make sure that the storyline is clear, the rules are clear, and sometimes they just have a few lines or a few conversations they want to add. And I don't know if this is a you know, I don't know how typical it is, but I know, this was something that I got to be part of, which was really cool.
So we knew that it was being developed from a short film. It was shown back in 2018. Um, can you just talk a little bit about how you pulled from that, that short, which is, as short's like 12 to 15 minutes, and how you turned that into this larger feature?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the best horror shorts I've seen have always been, you know, exploring a very small part of a really big idea, and I think that's what Baghead did. It's just a small window, but it's exploring this huge concept of, like, a woman who can access the dead, right? And I think that that just makes it, I don't know, that sort of opens up everything. Once if it's based on this really great high concept idea, there's so many directions it can go on, and you know the task is just to pick one. I think, so for me, I didn't feel like, constrained at all. Actually, I loved having the short there as a blueprint and a safety net almost to draw inspiration from, but because it was based on this, big idea, I felt like I had a lot of room to grow and play with the idea.
That's fun. And this concept of kind of creating like a script from a short, do studios do that often? Is this a process that happens often?
Yeah, for sure. Shorts and short stories as well. I think a lot of production companies and studios are buying the adaptation rights to short stories, and I think I actually think it's really interesting. I think it makes a lot of sense to me. Actually, I think sometimes there's amazing movies based on novels, but sometimes novels are almost a little too much for like a 90 minute to 2 hour movie. And I think this is a big, you always hear about people who love certain novels. And then when the adaptation comes out, there's, it's about what was left out and how it differed. I think short films and short stories are really cool to adapt because, yeah, like I said, it gives you like a little bit of a blueprint. It gives you a jumping off point, and gives you inspiration to go back to, but you then have this whole world to build off of, and I think
Right.
it's really cool.
That's so fun. And then again, we touched on this, but I kind of want to dive a little deeper about kind of horror as a genre and being a part of that world. I know you mentioned a little bit of the difficulty of like surprising people, but do you have like something where you could categorize as like the most challenging and then the most rewarding about being a part of the horror genre?
Um, I think it's I think that the solving the problem of how to do something different and surprise people is both like the most challenging and the most rewarding. I mean, it's most challenging to try to come up with that shock, that reversal, that just completely different scare or idea that people haven't seen before. But if you can crack the code and do something and really surprise people with like a good twist or a great scare, then that is amazing. Like that's just an amazing, rewarding feeling. So that's my favorite.
That's awesome. And then do you feel like there's like certain features of horror films that you have to like follow throughout? Like I know some people will like think of a movie and be like, well, that was a real jump scare of a movie. Like the jump scare was the surprise factor, or it's what you can see, or it's what you can't see. Like, do you feel like they like every horror movie kind of has its own personality that you follow in that sense?
I think it's such a huge, broad genre. I don't know. I think that even I don't know, I don't think there's any right way to do a horror movie, Like, I think there's so many different ways you can do the scares. Psychological horror to me is completely different than the kind of, yeah, the slasher movie or the jump scare ghost story. And I think, I mean, I love it all to be myself. I was I was rewatching like Black Swan the other night, and I was thinking to myself, I cannot, but like, it's not, it's sort of does fit within the parameters of horror, but it's so completely different than, say, I don't know, Get Out, I mean, I feel like there's no real rules, but every horror movie does have its own little distinct personality that I think it's just your job as a writer to figure out how you want to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then just a few more questions, if you don't mind. How do you feel like Baghead is different than other projects you've worked on? Obviously, could be a different genre and everything, but is there, distinctions that you feel like kind of make this one a little special than other ones, or?
Yeah, I mean, this was my first real thing I was hired to do, so it was amazing. It was a lot of fun. We touched on this before for me because I'm not, a television writer. I mostly do features, and it can be it can be you're spending a lot of time alone, right? And with Baghead, this was my first real experience of getting to work with the director, having conversations with the producers, um, having this sort of collaborative feel to the whole thing, and everyone's ideas sort of coming together to get this off the ground and turn it into something. So for me, after years of just writing specs on my own and trying to get people to notice, it was really cool to have this be sort of a community effort of making something happen.
Yeah. That must have actually, yeah, been a really nice feeling to just finally be like, oh, the ideas are kind of bouncing off of everyone. I feel this with video editing sometimes, of like putting that pressure all on yourself when you're doing everything yourself. And it's like, okay, well, this is nice to just feel like there's, yeah, things bouncing off. That's awesome. And then I guess, honestly, I'm sure you've written so much. Is there one that you're particularly proud of aside from this project? Is there like any other projects that you feel like, you know what, I'm really proud of this one?
Well, I really like No Good Deed was the script that kind of got me, noticed a little bit. I signed with my manager based on that script after he read it. And to me, it did feel really personal. I think I was sort of in that phase. I had two kids, and I had my father had passed away recently. I had all this sort of upheaval within a short period of time, and I think horror, one of the reasons we turn to it over and over again is because it's a way that we can really process and explore real world fears and real world trauma. And that just was how, I don't know, that's just how it happened. Like that's how it came out. And so it's always really personal. It feels like a very personal script to me. It feels like um, it's probably one of the more darker things I've written, which is, you know, for as a horror writer, I think that's saying something. But it felt really, I don't know, like it's just one of those where I have all these very clear memories of writing it and the mental and emotional place I was in while writing it, and so it still feels like really connected to me.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. It sounds like a tough time. But I mean, is there any kind of light you can shine on that? I know that's just a little bit of a weird question of just like, life does happen. So if there's just any advice on kind of getting through, I know I had a really, really tough year last year. So we talked about this a lot on the podcast with different guests, but just kind of any advice for that when, life's really happening, but, there are things that you really do want to pursue and you kind of feel like they become like your escapism almost.
Yes, for sure. I mean, life happens, life is tough, but there's, you know, you keep going and there's no, I don't know, there's no reason to discourage yourself from pursuing what you want to do and from being creative and from making things that you want to write. I think there's enough roadblocks in the world, external roadblocks. So don't put your own roadblocks up, right? Let yourself create. And do whatever you can to find that kind of fulfillment. I think that's what I would say. I think that that's the most rewarding thing to.
I kind of wanted to ask a little. You dropped that No Good Deed was kind of your first script. That can you talk about that a little more?
Sure. It's it's kind of a smaller horror movie in a way. It's only there's two characters really in it that are important, and it's a woman and her niece, and it's just their relationship as they're living together in this old house that happens to be haunted by this supernatural entity that sort of feeds on people. So these it's I don't know. I think it's not so much that it was this wild out there concept or anything like that. It was just getting to know these two characters as I was writing them, and using these characters to explore family dynamics and kind of how two family members and the love that they have for each other can also be really painful sometimes. Um, so that's I don't know. No Good Deed just grew out of all that emotion and feeling. And especially because I was swimming in like hormones from having had recently given birth, I think. Um, it just felt like I don't know, it felt very natural to be writing it, and it can't I think that's always a good sign. If it's the writing is easy, then that's something I like to pursue. And that's how it felt writing No Good Deed.
That's awesome. Thank you for touching on that. I just wanted to make sure we covered that as well. And then I just kind of wanted to talk about the industry real quick and just kind of the entertainment industry as a whole. Are there any hurdles that you've had to kind of overcome in this business, and just ones that maybe surprised you, or ones like misconceptions you had even that, turned out to be a little different than you thought, or just kind of anything, giving light to that?
Yeah, I think it's just really, really hard to actually get things made. It's tough. It's not necessarily something that was surprising to me. I think a lot of people hear this before embarking on any kind of career in film or television, but it is a little it, it it's not surprising, but it still feels like a new setback every single time sometimes. And so I think that's one of the lessons. It's just letting it go. If something doesn't work out, it's okay. You're not any new idea you have, any new project you have could be the one that becomes something great. So just not letting yourself get discouraged is really important. But it is something to keep in mind. It's you could have you could sell a script and spend years developing it only to have it never go into production. You could come really close to, you could pitch on a writing assignment and they love your idea, but then, maybe someone higher up decides they want to go a different way. I mean, these things just happen all the time. It's an industry with a lot of rejection. So just having that sort of psychological preparation and being able to boost yourself up is really important.
That's awesome. And would you give any advice to the students on if you want to go into the, script writing world, whether it be TV, film, short film? Can you give them a little advice on kind of what to have in your portfolio? What to go out into, the start of your career path with? Are there any like important things they should know to have? Start writing from now, just to have anything you can kind of give
Yeah.
advice on there?
I think to break in, you really only need one great script, but you might have to write like 12 scripts to get a great one. So, but you don't have to tell anybody about those 12 scripts you started with. I mean, you can hide them away and no one ever has to see them, but just keep writing. Keep writing. The more you write, the better the chances are that you're going to create that great script. And keep working on the script you have too. I mean, it's not going to be great right out of the gate. So just keep rewriting it. And just have that ready. I mean, and especially I think once you have a great script, it's always great to have a second one too. Usually maybe in the same genre or a similar genre as the first one. I think that's helpful for a lot of managers and agents. If they can sort of market you as, okay, this is my writer, and she's the woman who writes really great sci-fi movies with complicated female characters, then they know you as that person. And if they're looking for someone who can do that, oh, okay, that's who we need. Just makes it easier for them. But that said, I don't want to discourage anyone from writing what they want to write. Write what you want to write what you're passionate about. And, things hopefully will work out.
That's awesome. And then do you have like any people who were your second pair of eyes, or any advice on like, did you send it to family members or just friends, or like a few pages being like, can you read this dialogue out loud? And any moments like that?
Well, I have some great writing group friends.
Oh, that's
And I
awesome.
think
Okay.
that is important. I think having that first set of eyes, just to tell you, like, just a little quality control before you send it out. So I definitely am a strongly in favor of finding a good writing group that you can stick with. Um, I have a group. We meet twice a month, and I'm proud, actually. It's really hard with people's schedules and how busy people are to actually keep that going. But I think if you can, it's really helpful.
That's awesome. Okay, that's actually a really good point. Finding a writing group, because I feel like that also makes you feel a little less alone, probably. Just everyone's kind of going through the same thing. So that's always nice. And then just kind of finishing up here. So Baghead, are there any like fun facts you can tell us? Any behind the scenes fun facts? Or the film in Germany was pretty cool, actually. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I mean, gosh, yes, it was very international. Alberto, he lives in the UK, but he's, originally from Spain, and so it did feel very, I don't know, it felt very international, and lots of different minds coming in from all over. I'm trying to think though, if there's any trivia or anything. I don't know. I think. Yeah, I think it feels like, um, I don't know. I can't think of any.
No, you're fine. The trailer looked awesome. We're all so excited. We were thinking of doing like a little office field trip to watch it. But my boss Tia is not quite the horror fanatic, so she's like, I don't know, the trailer wasn't up for me.
I understand. I have the same. I don't know. I mean, I'm a huge horror fan, but most of my friends are
Yeah.
not. So
Yeah.
don't
Love
you
horror.
watch it?
I know. It's like more fun for people, I think, who love horror. That adrenaline rush might not be something everyone's chasing, but that's awesome.
I don't know. I really am. It's really fun to keep in touch with the American community and see how I don't know, how paths have strayed since I was there, and how, I don't know, like what people are accomplishing. So
Honestly, this is why we did the podcast. This is kind of what launched this podcast, is just like a good way for everyone to listen in on what alumni are up to. And like, we have old professors and, staff, faculty on that, have been here for so long that people get really excited to hear from. So that's always cool to see. But yeah, it's just kind of become like a little update space. So everyone was super excited to hear about this episode. So can't wait to put it out. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations on all the success. This is awesome. And we're going to let you know what we think when we watch it.
okay,
We're
great.
excited. So thank you so much for joining us on Media in the Mix. We are a bi-weekly episode, so this episode will be coming out on a Wednesday. And if you'd like to donate to the School of Communication, go to giving.american.edu. And that's a wrap.